left, right out, driving again. Interesting day in the markets. I didn't do anything yesterday, but it's pretty much the same today. Today we're anticipating the Fed minutes coming out and then the conference call afterwards by Chairman Powell. Basically what everybody expected, only there was no like surprise rate hike or anything, which I didn't expect. I expect them just to do it in March, and I think they're blind at the wheel, so you didn't expect them. What they should be doing is, an emergency rate hike right now, but of course that would send the markets even more turmoil. They were moving around quite a bit today. There's a lot of number of positions I should have took profits in and then came back in, but I just left it as is, where I'm pretty well hedged, and I hope you are too, whether you get a rip up or a rip down, because it could go either way right now. I mean, I think there's a lot of exhaustion out there, but I'm talking about people with loud vehicles, but a lot of exhaustion out there, but at the same time, there's a lot of room to go down. I mean, a lot, but doesn't mean we won't get that rip higher. So I've been prepared for that as well. And that actually had a little, a little bit of profit today. Anyway, I don't want to really talk about that. Let's talk about that press conference, because this is what is prescient right now for going on in the future, because I'm going to keep preparing for that downside flush, but not right now. I'm looking for it later on. But during that press conference, I listened to a lot of the questions. A lot of them were just, regurgitation of the same question from the previous one, just, a few different words. And of course, Powell dances around them pretty well. Now admitting that inflation's got kind of out of hand, judging by whatever metric they're using. But alluding to not really giving up the beans about whatever the next rate hike is. He's telling people that they haven't even really talked about it. They just now started talking about it for the next meeting. I mean, what do these guys do when they sit around? I mean, obviously that's the most pertinent thing on the agenda, is like, hey, let's talk about this. Well, what do you guys think? Well, I mean, how long do these meetings actually take? What is talked about? Because the questions that were asked about, like the size of the rate hike, or what the conditions look like in order to like reverse or to increase or whatever, those things have been talked about. To say that they're not talked about is like pretty worrisome, to be honest. But anyway, the only really good question that really challenged Powell, or would be considered a challenging question, came from Fox Business. I can't remember the guy's name, but he asked part of his question. I mean, I'm not going to give it verbatim, it's kind of paraphrased, but it was like, hey, some are saying that the Fed is actually late to the game, which we all know they are. Anybody with half a brain knows they are, unless you're drinking the Kool-Aid and the groupthink and have been, relying on your credentialed economics degree or whatever. But anybody that has a brain knows that you need to reteach yourself all that stuff. But anyway, asked him that question, and he didn't really have an answer for that. Now, the other side of that, which that's a real good question. It's like, hey, are you guys late to the game, or what are we going to do if you are late to the game? Is there a way to combat this? I mean, are we going too slow on this? But then he also asked about the chip shortage, because Powell had alluded earlier and had mentioned that he sees the supply side of things, those constraints, alleviating by the end of the year, or by this year. He said throughout the year to ease inflationary pressures, rising prices, whatever. However, the guy said, hey, on Fox Business, we just had Ford, because, a lot of the semiconductor, that's a big major shortage, semiconductors, chips, whatnot, Taiwanese, that's, if you listen to some of my last videos talking about the strategic importance of that over Ukraine. But anyway, asked him that, and he's like, well, I didn't mean that. I mean, the supply chain could be going for a couple years, 2023, 2024, because the Ford guy had said, hey, I don't see it really hardly improving this year. I mean, this is going to go into possibly next year, where we're going to see some of that alleviation of the bottlenecks in regards to the semiconductor stuff, that in regards to vehicles specifically, other computer components. But Powell quickly walked back what he was actually saying there, which to me is kind of alarming that they have such a idealistic view of this, because we don't really know, to be totally honest, because there's geopolitical issues going on over there, not to mention, with regards to just basic material supply, getting that, and then manpower over there, and then the bottleneck bottlenecks at the ports over here. I mean, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of variables, and they seem to act so simplistic about it. I mean, it is a very simple overall macro look at it, but then like there's other risk factors. Anyway, typical shuck and jive operation up there. That's what the Fed does, and they're telegraphing. Another one they asked was, are you constrained to, or pretty much I'm paraphrasing this, but it was asked a couple times, a couple different ways, are you constrained to the quarter point hike, or are you willing to go up to maybe half point? That's all they said. Well, my question would be like, what is the limit? Is there a limit? And he pretty much alluded to, they haven't even talked about it. I was like, what do you mean you haven't talked about it? That's like the next move. You should be 3 moves ahead. At the very least, you should have a primary, secondary, tertiary plan, and of course that plan can evolve, but you should have some basics at the very least. Hey, we've talked about it. This is what our baseline is currently. That is, based upon the conditions of where we see, or from the next meeting, that can change. Currently, this is our primary, secondary, tertiary, whatever mechanism approach. Granted, they can raise, lower interest rates and sell a few assets and buy assets. I mean, that's really their only tools. And then reserve rates, but no, it's very just enigmatic, like kind of speak, trying to keep it simplistic, but there's other stuff going on back there that I'm not alluding to. But all while somebody did ask about like low income people hurting, and he mentioned fixed income. It's like it hurts people all around, even rich people. I was like, dude, if you're rich, granted, yeah, inflation hurts everybody that's holding dollar denominated or dollars. But if you are rich, typically you have assets. So inflation is not hurting you, Mr. Powell, as much as the guy that's on the fixed income, the guy that's barely making it. Because, he did say this, it's like more of their income is going to these consumer products for necessary life, whether it be food, housing, basic Maslow hierarchy of need type stuff. So yeah, they're going to hurt the lower income people more. I mean, that's just up there. And that's just should be in your brain housing group. If they just clicks a little bit, that should be pretty self-evident. I mean, that's why you don't need a million studies to see that, and to recognize that people that are wealthy, let's call that, or above, they typically have assets, cash flowing assets that appreciate with inflation to kind of hedge that. And yeah, even if they are stupid and they just get rich out of stupidity, like he did mention, that's only people I could see that fall under what he was talking about. They can still, make it by and be able to, eat more readily than a lower income person. But the general rule of thumb, I guess, is most wealthy people don't get wealthy because they're, idiots. They're usually street smart at the very least. They have their money in certain assets that are going to appreciate in an inflationary environment, or they cash flow to a certain extent. So that seemed weird, but of course you're in a press conference. I understand you make mistakes when you're talking in front of people, and you're doing it a lot of times. But I mean, so that could be a little thing. But the guy's asleep at the wheel. They're doing they have no idea, it seems like, of the issue that they're facing. Like one of the most calamitous monetary policy extents over the span of a couple decades in the history of the world. But anyway, we could stop talking about that. Well, my stance on that, and I'm just giving you some of the other news. Immediately, the last thing is you saw the 10-year spike up to 1.8 something, 1.85. I saw it spike too, and that's just off, I don't know, a little bit of uncertainty. Like I said, when that thing starts really rocketing off is when there's a problem. It is in the grand scheme of things, relative terms within the last few years, it's moving significantly. In relative terms, in a number of decades, it's moving astronomically. But when we look at the collapse, it's going to move parabolically, and so we're not quite there yet. But that's where you look at. And I think when they raise rates this time and it collapses, I think they got one last time where they're going to try to really flush out, because every time they do it, the less the system can take. And eventually the system is going to just crack completely. And we're almost there. I don't know if it's this crisis or it's going to be the attempt to fix this one or the next one. We're right there. We're somewhere near it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for the YouTube side of things. I'm going to upload to YouTube and Rumble, and I'm going to do another one on Rumble, because you can't talk about certain things on YouTube anymore. Even this, I don't even know how well it's allowed, even though I don't get that many views. But on Rumble, there are people that watch some of my stuff, and it seems to disseminate further that way. And then on certain topics, such as the thing that shall not be mentioned, that's been going on for the last couple of years, and that you cannot talk about that hardly ever or at all unless you got some kind of clout, and even then you can be taken out to the woodshed and whipped with the switch. Anyway, talk to you later. Peace.